buddy. I'm snowed in over here in Northern Virginia. We've got like 12 inches of snow. I woke up at 6 o'clock this morning. It was shoveling. I pulled my back out, all kinds of stuff. We get a blizzard about once every other year. So, but not so much in St. Petersburg, right, LaVonna? What's going on?
No, no, and not so much. And yeah, I left Ohio for that reason. But I will say here, we're in the 50s, so it is snowsuit time for us. Not sweaters, not jackets, snowsuits.
Snowsuit. I like it. Well, I've got LaVonna Roth over here on the Community Connection. And LaVonna, I don't think we've actually physically met. We've probably shared time and space somewhere in our travels, a lot of conferences and those types of things. But we did a podcast with Dr. Neil Gupta from Ohio, and he was raving about you. And I was like, oh man, that's the connection. I found a statistic that St. Pete's has the world's record of having the most consecutive days of sunshine anywhere else in the world. Did you know that?
Okay, so I don't know that I knew it exactly like that, but I did know that we have a ton of sunshine days, and we're actually called the Sunshine City.
You are called the
Yes,
Sunshine City. Say that five times
go
fast
for it,
without.
Nate. Go for it.
I might drop the cuss word on that one. But Sunshine City. Wow, be careful how you articulate that. And you've got this great work called Shine, and that's kind of where I started following your work. And so obviously we're going to get into a little bit of that and your advocacy for women and women leadership. We're gonna talk a lot about that. But how was your New Year? How's everything going?
Oh, the New Year was awesome. It was just the whole holiday part. It's nice. We actually shut down as a company. We take 2 weeks off. One teammate is kind of checking things, but we take the 2 weeks off so that we can practice one of our core values, which is making sure that we do the self-care and with family and then obviously ourselves too. And so
Mm.
it's a great time that we get to practice that. We did have family come in on December 21st, and the last one left Sunday on the 5th. January 5th. So
Ooh,
it was a
wow.
revolving door the whole time, which was fun and loving, but, now we're also right back at it. So,
Well, you're more patient than me. I think Benjamin Franklin said it best that I think the some similarities between fish and family, they start to stink after after, after 3 days when you have them. So that's about my limit, it's like, all right, Pops, time to go. Off you go. Go and sit in front of your television screen and watch Fox News for 48 hours straight. Go on, Dad. Go off,
right.
off you go with that. So I'm glad that you were able to have that. We talk a lot about self-care, don't we? But I think
Yeah.
in education, we're like the worst at it. It's like
Yes.
because we're constantly serving. And it's the whole cliche thing, the gas mask comes out of the plane. Who do you put it on? You put it on first, not the gas mask, the oxygen mask. You put it on first, and then but it's hard, man. I think it's so tell me a little bit about that self-care. You've ingrained it as a core competency and component with your company. Um, where do we get self-care right and where do we get it wrong?
Yeah. So we do the core values do what's right, and that includes self-care because it is what's right. And
Right.
where I feel like we get it wrong is sometimes we are so hard on ourselves what it's supposed to look like. Well, it's
Mm,
supposed to be this, it's supposed to be that, and it's supposed to take me an hour, and it's supposed to do I think the demand is just another thing to do, and that's where I feel like a big hangup is. Where I
mm,
would love to see us get it right is that it's in those moments of saying, "You know what? I'm really feeling it right now, and I'm feeling the stress, I'm feeling my breathing change, or I'm feeling I'm reacting to people differently than I normally would or even believe in doing."
mm,
And having that awareness to me is where it's like, "Okay, what do I need right now in this moment?" And so sometimes
mm,
for me, it's just going on a walk in nature like, that's my it's kind of my non-negotiable for me. I don't have to work out every day, but I do have to move every day,
mm.
and I do walk fast. So and that's the second part I would say that I feel too that we need to do what we want to do. Like, I go to Orange Theory Fitness, and I do it because I am getting older, I need the
Yeah,
strength training with it too,
sure.
and so that aspect is fantastic. However, I don't wanna do it all the time. I don't wanna do it 3 days a week, I don't wanna do it 5 days a week, but I do
Mm,
say, "Okay, the goal is 2." And even if I only go 1, that's okay. I'm not gonna beat myself up over it because what I did do on the other days is I walked. And
mhm,
so for me, just saying, "Hey, what do you feel like doing today? Or what do you think you're gonna feel like tomorrow? And what do you think you need?" That makes my decisions. So some days I win with it, some days I don't, and that's also okay.
I think that's great. I think that's a good message for our listeners coming out of the new year. because we always have these big goals and these lofty aspirations, and these things that we want, the resolutions, and all these things. And what is it like? I don't know. Like most resolutions fail. They falter because they're not habits.
Yep.
And I think what you're talking about is habits. Charles Duhigg wrote about it. James Clear wrote about it with Atomic Habits. And I think we get into these patterns, especially with educators. Like we get in these patterns of service, and we feel like it's selfish to take care of ourselves. Because if we're taking care of ourselves, we're not taking care of others. Right.
Yeah.
And I remember as a principal, I was the absolute worst at taking care of myself. 9 years straight, serving. What I mean? Like, I was like, okay, my family's okay. I put them on the back burner because I got to answer this teacher's request and this parent's request, and the student needs this. And pretty soon I was overweight. And, I was, drinking way too much,
Yeah.
successful, outwardly. But like inside, I was like, I'm a disaster. Like what's going on over here, right? Because the habit was others and not of ourselves. What would you say in advice to young leaders or even leaders now that want to be more mindful of that for their teachers and for themselves? Maybe don't know how. Maybe have never been mentored that way. How would you
Yeah.
talk to them about that?
Yeah, I feel one of the biggest things is that we forget that we're also modeling. So yes, you're modeling service to other people, but you're also modeling at all cost.
Mm,
For you to name all the things that you were doing in the excess weight, and I can speak the same for when I haven't been taking care of myself.
yeah.
And we're only going to sustain for so long. But we're going to burn out. And I don't mean necessarily mentally, yes, it could be, but even physically, your body can
Mm-hmm.
only handle taking on so much weight without it being a cost of going to the doctors, a hospital, blood pressure,
Oh yeah,
medicine.
sure.
It's just an accumulation. And so I think those two factors, remembering that you are modeling. So if you model that, hey, I'm really feeling stressed today. Could we have this conversation in 10 minutes? Because I just need to take a moment.
Mm,
You just modeled. That's okay to do that.
yeah,
And
sure,
so
sure.
if we want people to follow what we're doing, or what we're doing or what we believe in, then we also have to do it ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And I know, Nate, I can totally relate to you. Like for me,
Mm,
I felt like if I didn't, help and serve somebody else, then people were like, well, geesh, look at you being selfish.
right.
No, not being
Yeah.
selfish. But what I think the important part though, too, is I'm saying this is that it's that second piece of, hey, I'm really low on energy right now, or I'm not in the best headspace. Could
Mm.
we schedule a time later today that we could have this conversation? Because I want to give you my best. So if that would work for you, I'd be willing to do that and see what they're willing to do.
I work with a lot of principals throughout the country, and it's fascinating. Some hardworking leaders, man. Some really hardworking leaders, and it's interesting because I work in a lot of states that have heavy union contracts as well. It's kind of interesting. And so the teachers, absolutely, they've got it embedded. They're going to have an uninterrupted lunchtime, right? An uninterrupted prep planning time, and but the poor principal ain't got nothing, right? I mean, nothing, right? They're running around. They're being, principal valet services. They're doing the discipline. They're doing the bloody nose. They're handling this. They're doing the walkthroughs. They're nothing. And I always feel like, man, it's so interesting that sometimes, like, cultures and contracts and things have a lot of protections and a lot of space for teachers to gravitate, center themselves and get do the best thing. But there's nothing for principals,
Mm.
and so the principal, once again, culturally has to serve everybody else. But I think sometimes even our teachers need to understand that the principals need support as well. They need to have someone check in with them. They need to have a time to eat and digest, if
Yes.
you will. So think about that little, maybe you can speak on that, about from, we're constantly serving our teachers, but sometimes who's also able to serve us? And is that selfish to ask that principals and leaders have someone serve them? You know what I mean?
Right. No, because I think sometimes we forget everybody's human, right? Everybody is human. So we,
Yeah.
there's practices that sometimes we even say, and then we mess up and forget, in the leadership role because we're still human. And
Mm,
you remind me of a post I saw yesterday. I don't know if you've seen this before, but it's basically the person who organizes also needs to help, like help us with organization. The person who
Mm,
is always giving positivity also needs positivity. And it
yeah.
was just that, recognizing what people need and being able to serve in that way. And
Mm,
so I think feel like leadership, yes, there is a lot put in place for teachers. I wish teachers would practice it more. I
sure.
feel like there's that it's established and it's there, but I don't think the practice is there. It's I gotta check the mailbox, gotta go to the bathroom, I gotta check the email, I gotta
Mm,
go check on this kid, I gotta go run to the office. So there's that aspect of it. But then when we think about leadership, the part from a teacher's view that I think sometimes I can admit I have forgotten is
mm,
that I was on my planning period. So let me just pop into the principal to ask this question. Well,
sure.
every
Sure.
planning period that is happening to the administrator, and there's all of this long laundry list. My husband is a
Right.
retired elementary principal.
Wow.
It's a massive list of
Massive.
things to do. And so I will say that one of the things I encouraged him to do was to shut his door, which he was not
Mm,
a big fan of doing because he liked the door to be open for conversation. But
sure.
you do have a right to shut your door, even if it's for 15 minutes,
Yeah, sure.
and just take 15 minutes here in the morning, 15 minutes in the afternoon, or when you can build it in. And my husband also, I don't know if you've ever heard of Sam's. Have you heard of Sam's before?
No, I know
It's
Sam's Club, but I'm a
Oh,
Costco
yes,
guy.
yes. A little different, okay, a lot different. That was a good one.
Tell me
But
about
Sam
Sam's. Tell me about Sam's.
Okay, so Sam's is the school administrator management system.
Mm,
And what they do is they work with administrators on tracking their time. And so they
mm,
have what's called a SAM, which is typically a secretary of theirs or someone from the front office.
yeah.
But the time is tracked into a system, a time track system. But it's really looking for how much time do you spend on instructional
Oh,
leadership?
wow. That's
How
cool.
much time do you spend? I know it's amazing.
That's
How
very
much time
cool.
do you spend on management, such as the toilet broke and you're the first person to be called as the administrator instead of the custodian?
Mm,
Or an angry parent comes in, you're the first one called instead of can we have others in place to de-escalate and then get to you if needed to protect you as the instructional leader. And then the third
mm.
one was anything personal. And so my husband used it for 10 years as an administrator and loved it. And now he does the coaching behind that.
It's pretty
And
awesome.
yes, because what it does is it literally schedules your time out. And of course, it's not going to be perfect,
Yeah.
but it does allow you to put those times in also to say, mm-mm,
Mm,
busy right now. And I'm sorry, but Mr. So and so or Miss so and so or Mrs. whatever the
yeah.
name is, they're unfortunately not available right now. They're in a meeting, and that meeting just might be with themselves,
That's cool. I wish I had a Sam.
right?
I wish I had some Sams. One thing that I worked on as a school leader, and even when I'm coaching school leaders now, is about really investing in strengths. Double down on strengths, but not neglect your areas of growth, right? And I don't even like saying weaknesses, right? You know what I mean? Like, because here's what's interesting: I'm not the most collaborative person, but but I talk all the time about collaborating, right? I get it. I'm vulnerable. I get it, but it's not necessarily a strength, but it's necessary for my job and my work and my craft. So I'm not going to neglect that area of growth, but I want to keep on working on that, but not to the detriment of my strengths. And I think with school leaders, sometimes going back to instructional leadership, like, other than safety, what else is
Yeah.
more important than instructional leadership? And I work with a lot of really, really hardworking principals that almost never spend time on instructional leadership. And
Mm.
their instructional leadership is the walkthroughs or the evaluations, and that's it. And like, you're a principal who's never taught kindergarten, and now you're evaluating a kindergarten teacher for doing that 2 times a
True.
year. Right? And
Yep.
so, can you speak a little bit about strengths and areas of growth or weaknesses, and or invest our time in? What should we not? That I know that's a Gallup had some research on this too. I think Gallup did some work on the strengths and weaknesses. Talk a little bit about that.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. No, I first of all, let's address the word weakness because I think it's
Yeah,
fascinating, right?
yeah.
Like you're talking about how not loving that, and most of us don't, and that's because I believe we have such a negative connotation toward that, right?
Mm,
So, because as humans and the way we treat each other, and even if you look at the job application, the diversity of skills that are required on a job application,
mm,
it go from interpersonal to physical skills to even mental skills, and yet we evaluate ourselves saying that we'll have to be good in all of that, or
mm.
especially women, are we qualified for that? And then there's research behind that, what I'm saying, why I'm saying, I'm not
Sure.
just have to say that. So when we look at the weaknesses, it's just that negative connotation. So one, either we can switch our whole lens on, okay, I do have weaknesses, and I'm totally okay with that because it's true. I do
Yeah.
have weaknesses, and we're going to have weaknesses. Or you can also switch the language. So I think about an example that can drive it home is if I were to say to you, Nate, we are about to do an activity and it's going to be hard. Tell me how you just felt when I said that.
Well, I mean, I like a challenge, so I'm like, hell yeah, let's do it. You know what I mean?
Okay, so you just nailed it because you didn't even use the word hard.
No, no, it's a challenge for
You
me. Yeah.
changed it. Yes. So that's what I was going to do the second time was to say, we're about to do an activity and it's going to be a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
We have a lot of us have like a visceral reaction to the word hard. Our brain does
Mm.
not want to do anything hard. Its job is to keep us surviving. And anything outside of that is like, oh no, 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 I'm good. I'm good right here.
Yeah.
If we change it to challenging, we're like, it's more intriguing and a challenge. Okay. But if I don't succeed, it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the language is sometimes it sounds like we're being picky. We should be picky.
We should be.
Yes. And I just love that you automatically, just that tells me you've already done work, you have positive mindset, you've already been thinking
Oh,
about
yeah.
it is a challenge. It is a challenge. So,
Right.
let's talk about that. So, and then the strengths aspect of this, that is when we talk about shine, the S and shine is self.
Mm.
And one of the things I've always believed in is that we're not going to be good at everything, but we have a measuring stick that we have to be,
Mm.
and especially perfectionism, or if we don't have that belief, then, or if we have the belief that we have to be good at everything, imposter syndrome steps in, and
Mm.
we begin to think, oh, but if everybody knows that I really don't know what I'm doing, or I don't know what I'm talking about, or I shouldn't have done it that way. And it's the release of all of that. And Gallup research did say
Mm-hmm.
that a strength, basically any of your strengths will remain a strength, but your weaknesses will never get to the level of a strength.
Right. Yeah.
So I wanted to say that again, right? As we like just kind of let that sink in, that a strength will remain a strength, and you're going to discover your strengths your whole life.
Mm.
But those weaknesses will never get to the level of a strength. But where do we always focus, Nate?
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Over on the
Exactly.
weaknesses. We spend so
Focus.
much time there.
We double down on it. Yeah. Exactly. Like I always felt that my strength was instructional leadership. Like that was a strength. So that's what I would double down and gravitate on.
Yeah.
And a lot of my weaknesses, areas of growth, whatever, were more of the managerial side, right? Because I was like, whatever. Okay, salt. We need ice melt for this, whatever. Who orders that? I don't know. We need a tractor. Whatever. I didn't.
Uh-huh.
But for other people, that was a big thing. So yeah, I agree with that. And I think it's that self-awareness and giving new leaders or potential leaders the opportunity to discover that self-awareness. Whether it's a Gallup poll survey, whether it's Strengths Finder or
Right.
something, or being around good mentors
Yeah.
that can model that.
Yeah.
I think
Can I
that's
jump in for a
yeah,
second?
please. Yeah.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but I thought this was brilliant what you just did. Thank you for that. I mean, you mentioned that you said, I am good at being like instructional leadership or being an instructional leader. I want to compliment and applaud you on owning that because
Mm,
that is what I want to see more of. We should be able to
mm,
say, this is what I'm good at. Where I see hesitation is because we feel like we're gloating or we're bragging, we're being arrogant.
yeah. Yeah.
One, it's how you say it. And two, earlier you already talked about whether it's phrasing it as a weakness or as something that you needed to work on for growth. You showed vulnerability there, which is exactly why you could then say
Mm,
exceptional leadership. So for those that are feel like we walk on eggshells, and we need to encourage more around the strength and having
hmm
that conversation and saying like, hey, by the way, if any of you need support with this is what I'm actually good at doing. I would love to help you. What are you good at doing? Because
hmm
if I need support or anybody else needs support, we want to know that. So I just had to pause you there because I was like,
Well, I
I want to
appreciate
hear more of that.
appreciate that. I do appreciate that, but I think that probably someone modeled that for me. Someone I trusted, someone that whether it was someone like physically or maybe from an author or something, someone modeled that for me, and that those things aren't natural. I don't. I think that's why I think potential leaders not only need good mentors, but I also think they need people to invest in them. And I got some stats for you. So I want to quiz you, LaVonna. Okay,
Okay.
what percent of teachers 0 to 100 are women?
So overall teachers,
Overall, what percent of overall teachers in the profession would you say are women?
I'm going to say 60%.
So very good. 74%.
All right.
So almost 75% of all teachers are women. And then we're going to go to, that's interesting, right? And then,
Yes.
yeah, it's fascinating. I didn't quite realize it was that high. And
Yeah.
then I'm going to go to the leadership. So of that, what percent are elementary women? What percent of women are elementary principals?
Elementary principals. Okay. I'm going to say 82%.
70%, pretty close.
Okay.
What percent are middle school principals?
2, 6, 72. I'm going to go 42.
Ooh, 44%. That was really good. And then this is interesting. What percent? Now there's 74% of teachers are women, right? What
Mhm.
percent are high school principals? What percent of women are high school principals?
I'm going to say 17%.
Uh, Higher than that, 36%, which is, when you consider everything else, it is still pretty low. And then,
Yes.
and then if I go to CEOs, if I move, because I always think, principals are CEOs of their company. So if I go to the traditional model of CEOs, this S&P, what percent of CEOs are women in major corporations?
I'm going to go 25%.
8%.
Oh,
Yeah, right. 8%. That's the most current research that I can find. 8% of CEOs in the S&P are women. So this is very interesting. This is a very interesting data. So you do this work, and we talk about mentorship. I'm interested in also not only mentorship but in investing and maybe what that would look like. So talk a little bit about this support that you have to empower women in leadership. So I'm very curious about that.
yeah. It's something I've just noticed over time with just conversations and with other women, and but also my own experiences, and then doing some observations of just things in general, whether it's within our own society or whether it's within looking at leadership. It's those stats are fascinating,
Yeah,
and
interesting.
scary
Yeah,
at the same time. Like with 8%, I knew it was gonna be low, but I didn't expect that low.
yeah, that's
So
huge.
I was trying to be more optimistic, but with that said, what really kicked me in the tuchus is how I'll say it,
Hmm.
was when I saw that the number of women going into leadership and even being prepped to go into leadership overall, not specific to education, is declining. And
Mm,
it's particularly in 6 different industries. So for example, like real estate is one of them.
that's
I
declining. Oh
yes.
wow, it's interesting.
Yes, and so if I believe right, I need to look it back up, but I wanna say
Yeah,
no,
sure.
might have been one also, but I can't remember now.
Hmm.
But anyway, it's 6 industries, and they're massive industries, and I'm thinking, "Okay, we need to see more women in leadership, we need to have that modeled," because if we don't ever get to see a woman in leadership, or it's rare we see a woman in leadership, and you are a woman, then you don't get to see it modeled for you that, "Hey, I
Hmm.
can do that too."
Mm.
So an example I can give you is I was at a speaking event and it was observing, and we got to the end and the gentleman had come up to me and he said, "LaVonna, what did you think?" And I said, "This was incredible." And I gave him all the reasons why I thought it was awesome.
Hmm.
I said, "I do have a question for you if you're willing to let me ask you
Mm.
something that may not be comfortable." And he said, "Of course."
Yeah.
And I said, "How many keynote speakers did you have?" And he said, I had 6 over the 2 days. And I said, "And
Mm.
how many of them were women?"
Mm.
And his mouth dropped
Oh
and he
yeah.
went, "None,
None.
none."
Wow.
And I said, "It's just something that you," and he's like, "Holy cow, I brought in people that I look up to, people that I'm close to, people that I know bring value, and I didn't even realize my circle was primarily men."
Mm.
And I
That's
said,
interesting.
again, it's not a judgment,
Yeah.
but it is an awareness to be made. And I said, "And in the room, you're encouraging people to become speakers. And what percent do you think about your audience was women?" And he said, "Majority." And I said, "Yet
Wow.
there were no women up there." And I said, "Now I'm okay. I'm already speaking as such. I'm okay saying, okay, I see it. I'm taking, learning from this. But how many women are sitting there going, but can I actually do it? Even if they're subconsciously thinking it.
Mm.
And I do this because I don't actually see me up there in any
Mm.
representation." So, I'm starting to see a shift. I would love to see more of a shift when it comes
Yeah.
to keynote speakers and having women represented. But that is the leadership aspect too. If we're going to have women
Hmm.
go into leadership, then that does need to be modeled as well. What are
Wow.
your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's interesting. I think this gentleman who put this organization or that event together, um, said it perfectly. I invited the people that I resonate with, or I invited. So it was a very um, through his hemisphere of interest. He thought that the audience would want to see what he wanted to see, right?
Yep.
Um, and I think that was, I don't think there was any malice. I think there was just a unconscious bias that happened. Um, there is mentorship and investment, and I don't think whether this is any whether this is women or whether this is minorities or anything, I don't know if we invest enough in people. I think there's a lot of mentors, but the sometimes the problem with mentors is mentors see things through their own hemisphere of interest, but investors, and we can kind of talk a little bit of what that might mean for people to invest in leaders, especially in education, is they're trying not to keep you here, do what I do, but investors are, I want to take you here, right? I want to take you higher than even I am. And I think there's a difference between a mentor relationship and an investment relationship. Does that make sense? So like an
It does.
investor would say like, hey, LaVonna, look, I got you, but look, I'm going to get you in that C-suite. I am going to get you into that. And we're going to navigate some of these parameters together. And we're going to see, here's our goal, and we're going to work the relationships. We're going to make sure that we're investing in the right work, and you've got a strategic plan in order to get you here. Mentors sometimes, well intended, want to
Right.
keep you here.
Yes.
Investors want to move you forward.
So I really appreciate the concept that you have between
Mm-hmm.
mentorship and how you're defining it versus investing, because there is a difference there.
Mm-hmm.
I am excited to say that there are some changes that I'm seeing. So for example, in Missouri, they have We Lead, which is Women in Education Lead. And I keynoted along with Beth Whitaker last year for it. And then 2 years, Missouri ESP, there we go.
Yeah.
For the elementary school principals, I will be going and keynoting for their Women in Leadership
Oh,
Conference,
that's
which
awesome.
then butts up against, I'll do also the opening keynote for the ESP part of it, the elementary school principals part.
That's awesome.
But yes, but Jay Anderson, and he has some women that he has been working with, and they came to him and said, "Hey, we want to do something for women in leadership." And he was like, "Hey, don't let me stop you. Like, what do you see this looking like? Go for it." And he's there solely to support. And I
Mm-hmm.
think it's incredible because it's taking whatever vision they have. To me, this steps into an investment, right? Because it's not him saying like, oh, like as you defined mentorship, it's not saying, okay, that this is where you want to be, then I can help you get to right here,
Mm-hmm.
but it's beyond that. It's the vision and running with that and putting into action. And so I think that is such a great concept. And we've been partnering with school
Right.
districts and organizations. So Florida ASCD and Alabama ASCD doing women in leadership conferences. And it's so valuable because bottom line is good leadership practices are good leadership practices, period.
Right. Right. Right.
But as women, we have experienced historically a lot of differences and continue to do so. Like I am horrified by some of the things that have been said to me
Mm.
specifically because I'm a woman.
Mm-hmm.
And so it is out there. People are like, oh, this is no, it's out there. It happens.
Mm-hmm.
I can attest to it. And so as we begin to look at how do we break through these barriers, the word that I chose this year for my one word, but also for Ignite Your Shine is shatter.
Mm.
And it's to shatter ceilings. It's to shatter
Mm-hmm.
the status quo, shatter limiting beliefs. And we're going to invite anyone who connects with us to do the same this year. And
Yeah.
so I would just love to see more of that. And the other piece I'll add, Nate, and want to hear your thoughts too,
Mm-hmm.
is that I think sometimes we forget to ask people what they want.
Mm.
But not only what they want that they're going to tell us they want, but have they done the self-reflection for what they truly want? And this hit me when I was in Nebraska for a Women in Leadership conference. And I did it in like 2 hours. Actually, I think it was 3 hours with them. And one of the activities I had asked women was to write down what are all the things that you define as success that you would say you've been successful with.
Mm-hmm.
And I have done this probably 5 times since.
Mm.
And every single time they tell me what those things are out loud. And then I say, I want you to raise your hand. If you wrote down, it's the number of letters as in degrees behind your name. I want
Mm.
you to write down or to raise your hand if it had to do the number of awards that you received. Zero hands
Zero?
all those times, zero go up. They're like, we didn't even write that down. Yet it's a yardstick that we all measure ourselves against. But I don't have a doctorate. I only have a bachelor's. I didn't
Mm,
get my master.
mm.
But yet it wasn't even on the list of successes. Zero. So
So
it
they may have a master's, they may have a doctorate, but they're not writing that as a success.
nope,
It is. Wow.
zero. At least as far as raising their hand to admit it, right? So even if there were some, it's fascinating that so have we done the self-reflection? Like I can tell you, and people said to me, LaVonna, when you start out speaking and consulting, you're gonna have to get a doctorate degree. Nobody will bring you in without a doctorate degree. Well, I didn't do it because why? I didn't want a doctorate degree.
Yeah.
I did 2 masters and I'm good with that. But, in all honesty, that was plenty of debt. I didn't need any more.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
I didn't even want it, and here we are. I mean, 15, 16, going on 17 years actually later, and I still don't have a doctorate, but I don't want it, and I just want people to reflect. Do you even want to write a book? Do you want to have a podcast?
Right.
Do you want
Right.
to, excel and come out of the classroom? If you do, awesome, go for it.
Yeah, exactly. That's fascinating. Well, here's something that I want to ask you about, and I think it's interesting because I'll go back to that stat. Almost 75% of teachers are women. Okay. So this is interesting. Yet we still have to have a conference for women in leadership in the education realm. Like, you see what I mean? It's all now that's interesting to me. Like, why are we not just why isn't just 75% of our speakers or our keynoters or our breakout sessions representative of the constituency that we already have? Now that's interesting to me. And I think
Yeah.
that speaks to something that people need to be aware of
Yep,
significantly.
yes, I was gonna try to reach it, but I'd have to move things to get to it. But I'm gonna botch it.
That's
But
all right.
Sheryl Sandberg has a quote, and this is not the exact quote, but
Sure.
it's basically looking forward to the day when we just talk about leadership and
Yeah.
we don't have to also talk about women in leadership.
Sure.
Leadership is leadership and all encompassing.
LaVonna, do you think sometimes women, either intentionally or unintentionally, sabotage other women for getting into leadership positions? Now, we talk about it. Men, I know men do. I know we do, right? I think maybe it's just human nature. But is there something about if you would, if there's 75% of women in education, right? Why are there's got to be something else going on. It can't just be the 25% of us fellas keeping everyone down. Like there's got to be something else going on there. Any thoughts on that? I mean, it's kind of a tricky, slippery conversation, but hell, why not? Let's just jump into it and see what we can come up with.
And I think it's important we have them.
Yeah,
They're not always fun, they're not always comfortable, and not everybody has to agree, and that's okay.
yeah,
It's just being open to conversation and different perspectives and thoughts. And so, uh, yeah, I mean, definitely, I'm going to say, if we're going to get uncomfortable waters, there's obviously the saying of the good old boy system.
sure,
I'm not saying that's always true. I'm not always saying that's the case. And I do think sometimes that we associate or blame things that may not be the case in that situation. I'm not saying it
mm,
doesn't happen,
sure,
right?
sure,
But on that same side, there's also where, it's like kind of that supply and demand. If there's
yeah,
one position, as we go up, if we think of, and I don't think of them as hierarchies of somebody being over somebody else, but if we go up what is traditionally known as you become an assistant principal, then a principal, then, assistant or associate
right,
superintendent, obviously the number of job availabilities also narrows as you get up there because there's only one superintendent, for example.
mm-hmm.
And so that also the supply is going to narrow, which means naturally as humans, I do think we become competitive from
Mm,
that point of view. And so I remember I worked for a job and I ended up getting laid off. And I was told as a woman walked me out to the parking lot, she said, I had a woman boss, a female boss, and she said,
mm,
just so you know, she takes all of your ideas and shares them with upper management as her own.
wow,
I was the one laid off. She was
wow,
not. And
mm,
the company isn't even around, so, it was just one of those situations, but that is an example of being,
yeah,
firsthand of watching
yeah,
how sabotage can happen.
yeah,
So, I try to step back and understand, from the point that it is human nature, and we have a saying at Shine that every behavior has a story,
mm,
right? It doesn't mean it's okay, it doesn't mean we enable it, it doesn't mean we don't address it, but for me, it allows that humanity side first of going, "Okay, there's a reason you're doing
yeah,
this." And I would actually be super curious to know why.
yeah,
you
Yeah.
know, and to have a heart and compassion from that lens, but then also to say, so going forward, this isn't okay.
It's not
Like
okay.
trust is broken, or, you know, it's true though. I'm gonna go back to what you asked me though. It is true that,
Hmm.
women can pull other women down.
Hmm. Hmm.
Firsthand, I've heard conversations, and this is where I would love to see that shift. And it's not
Yeah.
just based on gender. I would love to see it shift, like, how do we support each other? Because we are going to have different strengths. And all of it is needed in leadership. Like, not one leader gets a position and they're like, you know what,
Right.
I'll bring it.
Right. You're right. 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 Yeah, that's interesting. I think that those are things that aren't talked about openly enough. And I think you might as well rip the band-aid off and talk about it. Go from the water cooler to, the conference room, and talk about some of these things. One of the signs of a great leader is how many leaders they make, right? And how many leaders they invest in. And I go back to that mentorship versus an investment. I think that any leader that's listening to this, I would like to ask, who are you investing in? Who are you saying, hey, listen, what are your goals and what can I do to leverage my position to get you to a position of your dreams? Because we're all renting. I mean, like, we're all renting, and like I remember when my superintendency or my principalship, I was like, listen, I'm leasing, like I don't own anything. I'm going to be gone and no one is going to bat an eye. It's going to be as soon as I'm out, someone's going to get the job just like that.
We'll give you a little longer, but
Oh,
okay.
I don't know about that. You're out. You know what I mean? So, but the folks that were able to grow because of you, not just mentor, but because you invested in those people, that's really your legacy. Because that's where the missionary work will really become. And I think that for those that are listening to this, that would be my question: is who are you investing in? And I think that as long as we can maybe take a pause and think about that going into the new year, it's one thing to mentor people to be like you. It's another thing to invest people to be better than you. You know.
Yes. And I'd like to add to that too, that we don't like how we define leadership at Shine has to do with everybody as a leader. Because we believe everybody is a leader. You may
I
not have the
agree.
title, but you are a leader. And it's
I agree.
finding, how does that person lead? And a lot of times, which I think also can go back to the statistics, is that people don't even see themselves as leaders
Mm.
to even believe that they could become a leader. But again, we believe everybody does lead. And an example that I'll give you is Lori Weber. She is a kindergarten teacher in Georgia, and she had come to speak Ignite Your Shine. She loved the Shine framework, and she embedded into her classroom, and she saw incredible success,
That's awesome.
and just like heartwarming to the point, like, one student kindergartner went home and his mom sent a picture of, he had written the word shine with the little dots because it's an acronym,
Yeah.
shine on a white lamp. And
Oh
she
wow.
said, I can't even be mad at him because of knowing what Shine is doing. But
Fascinating.
the next year, people saw what was happening in Lori's classroom, and her students stepped in as kindergartners to lead the school in doing, how do we bring shine? How do we highlight our strengths? How do we, they came up with like school mantras. They have books that align with it, like everything you can imagine.
That's
And the
awesome.
school jumped on board. And that's one person who,
One.
I can speak to this, and I don't think Lori will mind, but
Mm.
Lori didn't see herself as a leader,
Mm.
but she impacted the entire school
Yeah. Wow.
by doing that. So I just encourage us to look at leadership a little differently. And it's not the title, but how do we help support everyone lead using their strengths?
I love it. And she invested in herself,
Yep.
and then you invested in her, and then she then invested in her students. Her students invest. That gives me chills, man. It gives me chills, and it's not only because it's 10 degrees outside. It gives
Right.
So tell us a little bit about, what a fascinating conversation, by the way. I,
I
I,
love
I
it.
love this stuff. So
Thank
tell us
you,
a little
Nate.
bit
Thank
more
you.
about Shine. Tell us a little bit. Just go through that acronym and tell us about your company and where can our connectors get a hold of you, contact you, connect with you. So yeah, tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So Shine was originally meant for students. And it was from the perspective of, how do we build confidence? Because I have 8 books all based on how does the brain learn, how do we engage students, and all that came down to, what I realized is the brain has to be in a state of learning, and we have to believe. Well, that's going to
Mm.
be confidence. And the more that I thought about it, confidence is key. Confidence affects
Confidence is
all
key.
performance of what we do, and whether we will take the risk to get the confidence, or to go, that didn't work out. Why didn't it work out? What can I do different? Oh, here we go, and
Mhm.
have some success. But what happened was I was having administrators, police officers, military, board of education directors coming and saying, "You have no idea how badly I needed this."
Mm,
And I went, "Oh my goodness, this isn't just for students. This is actually a human thing." And so now we apply it really looking at leadership and how do we, because we know the impact of what leaders have on everyone else, and then reversing that and bringing it back up.
mhm,
And so shine, the letter S, is self, and we focus on primarily what are your strengths, gifts, skills, and talents. So
mhm,
some of the things that you're born with, some of the things you're not. And as we already discussed, it's the, strengths will remain a strength, but there's those weaknesses. And so yes, identify, work on them, but how could you use your strengths to actually either overpower or overcome the weaknesses that you have of what you're trying to
mhm.
achieve? Or how can you turn to others, invest in them in this case,
Yep.
using their strengths to be able to pull them in and true collaboration. So, and it also has to do with self-care, which we touched on, and also has to do with your mindset. When we
Mm,
get to H is heart. And so what are you passionate about? What do you love to do? And I think that the two really have to come together. So the S and self and the H and heart need to come together, as we call that the shine spot,
mm,
because we want to take your strengths, but also with what you enjoy doing. And too many times we live our life, well, it's just a job, not necessarily in education, but outside I hear
mm.
a lot of, it's just a job, it's just a job. You're talking about a majority of your life that you are working in many
Oh,
hours of each day, that that's
absolutely.
the job. So
Mm,
what are we good at doing and what are we passionate about? And it's the same thing for students. That would look like, what are they good at doing, each individual student, and what are they passionate about? And can you teach through that lens, which you can. And
yeah.
then we get to the letter I. I is inspire. So how do you inspire yourself? How do you inspire those around you? Because we believe that you have a dual responsibility for both.
Mm,
N is navigate. What are you gonna do with everything that I've been talking about? So it's putting everything into action. If you know that you have something that you're good at doing, but you're not utilizing it, you're not sharing it with others, or the heart and your passions or inspiration,
mhm,
what was the point? You are
mhm.
here for a reason, and we all want to make a difference. That's a human need, is to make an impact and make a difference. And so that navigate piece is you putting it into action, which the whole shine framework supports you in doing.
Yeah.
And then we get to E. E is exceptional because you're becoming the exceptional person you were meant to be, not anybody else. And
Wow.
so many times we compare ourselves to everybody else, but the beauty of it is we are different. And I can't tell you the amount of relief and burden that came off of my chest when I tapped into this and realized, be you, be
Yeah.
you.
That's
I know we hear
outstanding.
that, it's a cliche, but it's true.
Oh, I love it. Man, I'm ready to, man, you got me jacked up. Like I'm like, I want to go shine. I want to go melt some snow
Good,
right now, man. That's
good.
really, really awesome. LaVonna Roth, outstanding. What a pleasure to meet you and to know about your advocacy and what you're doing. Um, it's inspiring, and I just want to, and anyone listening, contact you. Or how can we contact you? Where can we get a hold of you?
I appreciate you circling back to that because I forgot that part.
Yeah.
So you can go to our website, igniteyourshine.com, and that's one way. But also, we are primarily on LinkedIn and Instagram. And so it's at Ignite Your Shine, except if you're on Instagram, it's at Ignite Your Shine Now.
Mm,
And then my name, LaVonna Roth, is going to be the handle for both of those. So it just, for those of you that are only listening, if you happen to have paper or something, or I know it'll probably be in the show notes, but it's
yep.
LaVonna, and Roth is Roth. I would love to connect with you.
And hey, thank you guys for joining us on this episode of the Community Connection.
Thank you so much, Nate. What you're doing is awesome.